How not to do Datura. What you are about to read is a shining example that Datura is indeed not a drug to be taken lightly or in my opinion used period. I had been dating a wonderful woman with an amazing family for just over a month. I was completely down on my luck when we met and to this day still don't know why she took a chance on me. I noticed a Datura plant growing in her grandma's front yard. Being curious, I picked a seed pod and held on to it for a few days. I had read about this substance for years and wanted to try it but had never found it growing wild and refused to purchase anything I intend to ingest from the internet. I have an extensive drug history. I do not feel the need to qualify myself farther. The first time I tried eating the seeds I had 5 as a test run. Nothing happened. I fell asleep. The next time 15. Again nothing. I was beginning to wonder. But of course third time's a charm, or in my case occurs. I consumed 40 seeds one morning approximately 11 a.m. I was in good spirits and had no major worries pending that needed immediate attention that day. I did not have a sitter. Never have. Never really needed one. Began doing things to pass the time, watched some TV, played Xbox, checked Facebook. An hour or so and I began to feel different. Mildly fuzzy I guess, but in previous experiences this had never happened. So I thought it best to go get in bed and cover up and see what happened. That is my last real memory. I am told I went completely insane. Ingested copious amounts of her grandma's medication including but not limited to gabapentin, lorazepam, tramadol, her grandson's Ritalin. Not some, all of it, roughly 200 milligrams. I tried vacuuming mattresses. I went to the bathroom, pissed all over the floors, all in front of this poor woman and her grandchildren. My girlfriend and her mother were called along with an ambulance and the police. Thank God they handled the police. I am on parole. I went to the hospital via ambulance and was admitted to the psych ward. I finally came to somewhere around 48 hours later. I still have somehow salvaged the relationship with the girlfriend, but I'm mortified by my actions. I had been struggling on and off with sobriety, but this drug may have finally given me the kick in the ass I needed to stop. I don't know if anyone will read this and take note of anything I have said, but I am going on record as saying this is the most overwhelmingly powerful drug I have ever done, and I have completed treatment for 4 heroin use, just for example's sake. I am writing this in the hopes that it will prevent someone else from severe injury. This is not a report of how I am affected by the drug Datura, but by my nephew, who is in very, very bad shape. My 16-year-old nephew is currently in I.C.U. and still after 36 hours is incoherent and nearly comatose. He hasn't recognized any family members or his surroundings since this started. His pupils are dilated, nearly the size of dimes. He is apparently in living hell, as demonstrated by his horrified facial expressions of bulging eyes and uncontrollable trembling. He is continually doing sporadic mumblings, with paranoid darting eyes and scanning around the room, looking at what we can only imagine. It is very obvious that he is experiencing true terror and horrific scenes of hallucination. His heart rate is hovering around 115 to 130 BPM and his mouth is coated with blood. He is shaking, agitated and in 4-point restraints, which he got out of and tried to pull the catheter out of his penis, which would have resulted in severe injuries did he not get stopped in time. For the first 9 hours of his high we were in the dark about what could be the cause of this. Ambulance drivers, fire chief, police all said it was drugs, but the test results all came back negative, blood and urine samples negative. This all led the doctors to believe this was neurological, and my nephew was taken for a CAT scan, where results still came back negative. We all feared the worst: brain damage, aneurysm, etc. Every terrifying thought came to mind. All family members were called in the middle of the night, where we all rushed to the emergency room. We cried, worried and prayed. The younger children witnessed this chaos and won't soon forget. If you want to try this drug, please consider what the effects of this on others will be. $20,000 hospital bill, at least I.C.U. for days, CAT scan, ambulance, specialists. Please take warning. We can't determine how much he took, as a plant with 4 pods were found in his room. We still don't know if he will pull out okay or not. The doctors cannot say if there will be any long-term effects. We are so worried. I've just now sobered up from the craziest night of my life. Me and a friend of mine swallowed 3 tablespoons each of Datura needle around 7 p.m. Within 15 minutes I felt extremely drunk. After that it gets hazy and I have no sense of time. I finally fell asleep around 5 a.m. and woke up at 11 a.m., feeling totally sober. I just have a little trouble focusing my eyes, but that should go away soon. With that out of the way, here are some of my experiences from that night. I was telling people how comfortable my new shirt is. I wasn't really wearing a shirt, but I was convinced I was wearing an orange silk shirt. I also thought I paid $100 for it. I had all the lights off in my house and was laying in bed trying to sleep when I sensed a presence outside of my window. I peeked through the blinds and I saw a male and a female creature of some sort. They looked like Bigfoot, but with long thin hair and very human-like faces. They looked incredibly evil. They were having sex standing up. When I saw this I ran to get my camera. I couldn't find it so I came back to look at them some more. This time they looked directly into my eyes and became incredibly frightened. I ran very quickly and locked the door. About 5 minutes later someone knocked on the door. I grabbed my nightstick and asked who it was. It sounded like one of my friends so I slowly opened the door, with my nightstick ready. At this point I realized my fellow tripper was missing. I spent the next couple hours driving around town looking for him. I finally gave up and went home to go to bed. When I was laying in bed I saw a shadow float past my door. I grabbed my nightstick and knife and went after it. There was of course nothing there. I then saw a snake crawling towards me. I threw my knife at it and it turned into a belt. I spent a good while wandering around this house, weapons in hand. I was finally able to fall asleep. When I woke up this morning I discovered a very large sideways V carved in the side of my neck. This middle of it is very red and there is a big hole in the middle where I used to have a mole. I have no idea how or when this happened. My roommate was not home yet so I started to look up the police number when he called me from the hospital. It turns out he got arrested around 2 a.m. He was completely naked running around outside. He was fighting so they put him in heavy restraints for about 6 hours. We both had constant hallucinations the whole night. I kept picking things off the ground and they would quickly disappear from my hands. I also thought the person in the mirror was my evil twin and it was mocking me. I yelled at it to leave me alone when my friends pulled me away from it. When I was driving to find my friend I kept having different people appear in my passenger seat, but as soon as I said anything to them they disappeared. There are too many hallucinations and confusing experiences to describe now. Let's just say this is by far the craziest drug I have ever done and will never do it again. You cannot tell the hallucinations apart from real things. If you do decide to try it, use a sitter. I first made the decision to try Datura after a friend tried it and had a pretty positive experience, aside from eating $80 worth of pot because he insisted that it was a bag of peanuts. The previously mentioned friend had some left from his last trip, about 1/4 cup, so that is what I used. The brew was made from 8 yellow flowers and a large amount of leaf material which was boiled in about 2 liters of water for 2 hours. It was a Wednesday night when I drank my 1/4 cup mixed with coffee, milk and 2 sugars, and I was still affected on Friday night. I didn't even notice the taste. By the time I had finished my coffee I had nice warm feeling in my stomach which soon began to spread throughout my body. 10 minutes later I needed to take a leak and tried to stand up but as soon as I was upright I fell back into my seat feeling bemused. I tried to stand again but this time I fell on the ground. I eventually made it to the toilet and back then I started getting the visual effects, the walls and floor melting and moving around greatly. Then my memory starts to get fuzzy. What I know from here on is what my friends told me. I then proceeded to have conversations with various objects. Hey Basin, where's the wallpaper at? Eventually I lost all contact with reality and started talking to people who weren't there and walking into various things. After 2 to 3 hours of this my flatmates became sick of me and locked me in the bathroom. I then stayed there for a couple more hours and then climbed out the window sometime between 3 or 4 in the morning. I don't remember anything until the next morning when I knocked on our door at 9:30 a.m. as if nothing had happened. That is where my memory kicks back in. I started to come down again at about 11 a.m. The come down was way gentler than I had expected and only had blurred vision and a slight headache for 2 days, but now my eyes are perfect again. The whole experience was pretty fun, but the trip you get is the most savage and intense you will ever experience. Nothing can prepare you for it, so only do it if you have someone to babysit you or you have a room where it is almost impossible to hurt yourself. Even a simple cheese grater can be dangerous. I almost grated my fingers cause I thought I had a block of cheese in my hand. The trap that gets most people on Datura is that the hallucinations are so vivid you don't know they're hallucinations. I would trip on Datura again, but I won't be doing it for a couple of years. First off, I would just like to say never, ever do this drug. The high was impossible to describe other than scary, feverish and delirious. My brother showed us a plant one day and said he had read about it on this website. He told us that if you eat a pod of seeds you get a trip similar to mushrooms mixed with acid. Since I have never tried acid and I have never had mushrooms work on me, I was quite curious to try it, especially since it was free. Me and a few friends picked about 10 pods and went to my friend's house. His parents were gone to the cottage for a couple of weeks, so we decided it was the perfect time. We had all sniffed a pill or two of E and it wasn't really affecting me too much, so started our adventure. We took the seeds out of 4 pods and crushed them in a mortar and pestle. We then boiled the seeds for about 20 minutes and put the seeds and water into a tea kettle and put 2 tea bags in to sit. We let it sit for about 10 minutes and the 4 of us prepared our first cup each. We added lemons to it since the seeds had such a bitter taste. We drank 2 cups each and then me and one other friend split the 4 pods of seeds between the 2 of us. The E was just getting to the peak when I had finished the tea and I went outside for a smoke. I got outside about 5 minutes after finishing the tea and that's when we ate the seeds. In about 10 minutes, after I had finished my smoke, I started getting dizzy and feeling very frustrated. About 10 more minutes passed since I had consumed the actual seeds and now I could not control my vision at all. Shadows and darker objects would blend into each other and everything seemed to move to the right. I was now beginning to hallucinate and started to get very scared. I was later told that I was curled up into a ball sitting on a chair on the front porch talking to myself and drooling. During this time I remember talking to 5 bikers who came to house looking for me and my friend to beat up. I was scared, so I went into the fetal position and fell off of the chair, and when I stood up all my friends appeared out of nowhere. They weren't there when the bikers approached me, and they were asking if I felt the Datura yet. I suddenly felt a lot less alone and somehow I was practically sober again. My vision returned to normal, for the moment, and I could have a conversation without mumbling. I was asking my friends if they were feeling it yet and they all said no except my friend who I split the seeds with. Everyone then went back inside except for me and my friend who was tripping, and I started to feel it again. But this time it was much more potent. I started to see squirrels and raccoons all over the front yard and they seemed to have spotted me. They all stopped to look at me and began running at me. I again curled up into a ball and rolled around on the ground as they attacked me. When I noticed that I felt no pain, I looked up to see 4 cop cars stopping in front of the house. Scared that they saw me defending myself from imaginary animals, I lit up another cigarette and tried to play it cool. As I looked up after sparking the smoke, the cops had disappeared and a dragon was floating in front of us. My friend, they jumped to his feet and screamed, "Look!" They threw him off the balcony. The fat guy threw him off the balcony. He then looked at me with the most serious look on his face and said, "He's dead, man. We should call the cops." I don't know if this really happened, but he picked up his shoe and tried to dial 911. When nothing happened, he threw the shoe across the yard and ran into a bush and started crying. By now I was starting to realize that almost everything was an illusion, but it seemed so real I could not separate them from reality. A feeling of aloneness, anxiety, as if I was claustrophobic and trapped in a small box, and severe restlessness. When I looked at the bush to see if my friend really ran and hid there, I saw a little girl hung from a tree branch with blood coming out of her mouth. I turned around because I was pretty sure it wasn't real and she was standing inches away from my face screaming. I then started to cry and wanted to get off of the drug as quickly as I could. As most other users of Datura have noted, my mouth was really dry and my throat burned. I decided it was time to go inside where my friends could comfort me and try and help me get off my high. As I said before, I felt like I was being trapped in a really small place and my skin felt like it was burning and itching. I was in severe physical and mental discomfort. I remember dropping to my knees and praying to God to help me get off of the drug. I drank about 5 cups of water simultaneously. I felt something wet on my feet and I looked down to see myself standing in a pool of water. From my earlier experiences, I realized rationally thinking and turning away from what I was visualizing would get rid of my hallucinations. I drank 1 more cup of water and decided to go watch TV and try and focus my attention on something real. As I was in the kitchen drinking the water, I could see all of my friends sitting around the table, but I couldn't make out what they were saying. I wandered to a secluded room and sat down on the couch and turned on the TV. I was now feeling more confident, but the anxiety and burning off my skin and mouth continued. I was watching Jerry Springer and I could hear muffled voices but couldn't understand what they were saying. I then started feeling very angry and frustrated, so I looked to see who was talking. As I looked over where the voices were coming from, the voices became clear and I was in a room filled with all my friends who were not in their moments before. They were yelling and rolling joints and I kept yelling as loud as I could, "Shut up, shut up." Then I looked towards the entrance of the room and my friend was doing cartwheels. I looked back to see if anyone else noticed my friend doing cartwheels, and the room was empty and the TV was not even on. I could clearly remember the episode of Jerry Springer, and I now was becoming very scared and uncomfortable. The next thing I know, I woke up to the sound of knocking on the window. I looked over and saw nothing, and then looked again, and 3 burnt faces simultaneously popped up to the window screaming. I then actually woke up in cold sweats and felt the sudden need to vomit. I tried to stand up but fell flat on my face. After putting all my energy into it, I got up and wandered to the washroom, bumping into every wall on the way there. My friends who were sober asked me if I was alright, and I tried to say yes, but I just started screaming in pain. I felt as if I was dying, and I ran into the washroom. Every movement I made sent a rumbling effect throughout my whole body. I tried to throw up, but all I could do was cough and burp. I wanted to get the Datura out of my system, so I shoved my fingers into my throat trying to vomit. Nothing would work. I was crying and shaking, and my skin felt as if it was on fire. After 10 minutes the nausea wore off, and I went back to the couch I was sleeping on. Again I felt as if I was going to vomit and repeated my last mission to washroom, but could not get myself to vomit. I then started punching myself in the head and knocking my head off walls, trying anything to make myself sleep. Nothing would work. I then vomited all over myself and passed out from the numbing in my brain. I woke up in heaven, flying through clouds and rainbows. I saw all of my friends I was with above me looking down with very concerned faces. I felt as if it was a warning, telling me that I was almost on my deathbed and that I was messing with very dangerous substances that I was not educated on. As I floated around, my life was flashing through my mind like in a movie right before you die. I saw my family at my funeral all crying, and my friends as well. I was speaking to a voice that was telling me this is what will happen when you waste your life away. The voice said that this time I was lucky, but next time I won't be. I then was back floating through the rainbows and clouds, and I wished I could be there forever. I decided this wouldn't be the last time I tried Datura, since I could not recall any of the events that previously happened. But then I saw the concerned faces above me, and reality set in, and the faces were real. I was lying on the washroom floor with puke all over me, and my friend was screaming at me to wake up. I stumbled back to my bed and passed out, relieved that I was alive. All the illusions had now stopped, but the burning was still present. It felt as if my whole body was sunburnt and itchy. I woke up the next day and looked at my watch to see what time it was. All I could see was a blur. Now, sober enough to know what's real, I was truly frightened and believed I had gone blind. For the next 6 hours I could not read anything before 2 feet in front of me. Anything past that was perfectly clear. It has now been approximately a month since I did the Datura, and the effects are still present. I still sometimes have trouble seeing, and in the dark I still see shadows move and blend into each other. I have very realistic dreams that are hard to distinguish from reality, and I may believe that some of my dreams were real. I now talk during my sleep because of the vividness of the dreams, and my skin is still sensitive. This is my experience on Datura, and I will get my friend to also write up his experience, since he consumed Datura 4 days in a row after that night, against my wishes. Introduction. On the night of 10/27/2000, I was desperate to get high because I had been sober for 2 months. My friend L was blabbing about combining drugs, and he ended up betting me 1/4 of an ounce of marijuana that I wouldn't do all of these drugs at once. I agreed on the bet, and we gathered up the drugs. I paid for the bud, DXM, alcohol, nutmeg. He got the Datura, Vicodin, and Ritalin. In case you're wondering, before this experience I had smoked weed, tripped off of DXM, only once, using 8 pills, tripped off of Datura, called Moonflower where I live. I've taken it twice, both times eating all the seeds in one pot, and gotten drunk. I had never tried Vicodin, Ritalin, or nutmeg before this. There were 3 people involved, including me. I will call my 2 friends L and M. To prepare for the experience, we got all of the drugs I was going to take. It was a Friday, so I was able to stay away from parents, cops, teachers, etc. for a few days. I went to L's house, along with them. L's father was home at first, but the only people at L's house from 12:45 p.m. Friday to 4 p.m. Saturday were me, M, and L. We also got ice cubes, Jolly Ranchers, and orange juice. We had everything ready and planned out by about 1 p.m. All names and phone numbers have been changed. The first thing I did was eat the nutmeg. I had a full 1.1 ounce bottle of it. I ate mouthfuls of nutmeg at a time, swallowed as fast as I could, then drank the orange juice. I ended up eating that whole bottle of nutmeg, very hard to do without puking. I got very close to puking, but stopped myself. I waited until 1:32 p.m., then I swallowed the DXM pills, Coracetin cough plus cold, 16 pills, 480 milligrams of DXM. At 1:45, I ate the moonflower seeds, 2 pods with about 2¼ inch in diameter, about 140 seeds, uncooked, not dried. Then I snorted a little less than half of the Vicodin pill and half of the Ritalin pill. I started feeling dizzy and lightheaded by 1:53. At 2:40, I was still feeling the Ritalin. I think it was the Ritalin. I was hyper and dizzy. I also think that the moonflower trip had started too, and definitely feeling the DXM. I wanted a high of the weed, so I smoked about a dime. I had a quarter for me to smoke. L and M had an 1/8 ounce for them to share. L and M smoked a couple bowls between them. We just sat around and talked until about 3:10, when M was telling me I had better drink the alcohol and smoke the rest of the weed, because I would be tripping too hard. I smoked the rest of the weed, but it really hurt my throat. I had bad dry mouth from the moonflower. I was sucking on ice cubes while I was smoking, and that helped a little. The Jolly Ranchers didn't work as good. The last thing to do was drink the alcohol, so I drank a screwdriver that Al made, with about 4 shots of vodka, and drank about a cup of Captain Morgan's Parrot Bay coconut rum. Al's dad bought it and the vodka, then he left for work. He didn't know about the other drugs though. I felt really fucked up. The only things I remember after this was watching parts of the first 5 or 10 minutes of Scream 3, M rented it, and talking some. The rest of the story is what Al and M told me. I don't remember any of it except parts of my dreams. When we were watching the rest of the movie, I kept leaving the room. M followed me, and I guess I just wandered around his house. He would tell me to come back to the room, and I would respond by just blabbing on like, "Oh, he doesn't have the pipe, but I bet the gem will." Or "Seriously? I thought you weren't." M would just then lead me back into his room. I said something like, "So the dog has burned my throat," and pointed to my mouth. Then I tried to run to the bathroom, but I kept falling and stumbling, so I crawled to his trash can and puked in it twice in a row. My eyes were very bloodshot, my pupils were dilated, and my eyes were wide open. I peed my pants at about 4 o'clock, and at 4:45 I could hardly breathe. I tried to talk, but when no sound came out, I just pointed to my mouth and started crying. I was drinking a lot of orange juice, and eating ice cubes and Jolly Ranchers to try to get rid of the dry mouth. At about 6:25 p.m., I passed out on the floor of M's room. In my sleep I was twitching a lot, and I was saying everything out loud. My friends stayed awake to make sure I didn't break anything, and sometimes I woke up and rearranged things for no reason, like putting a stack of paper in the freezer, and moving the TV around the room. From 6:30 p.m. to 3:20 a.m., I was talking, but I slept until 6:15. These are some of the things my friends remember me saying. "Seriously?" I said that at least 8 times. "Hi, is B there? Isn't this 555-0934? B is one of my friends. Hi, is R there? It's already 8 o'clock, what's taking you so long? R is my weed dealer." It was about 11 p.m. when I said that. "Why, get in here. Why is my brother?" I yelled it loud. "Man, where'd the bowl go? It was right here." I said this a lot, sometimes saying joint instead of bowl, and I would open my eyes most the times I said it. You can't do that already. I remember everything after I woke up. When I woke up, I was still tripping off the moonflower, but everything else had worn off. I was hearing things and felt kind of drunk. As for visual hallucinations, I only remember 2, some moving green blob on my door, and color differences. M told me, "Why were you talking so much, man? Last night was so trippy to see you like that." I had no idea what he was talking about. Then M and L told me about how I was talking for such a long time. The only things I remember dreaming about were calling B on the phone and walking around my school. I stayed at M's house, but L went home at 8 a.m. I went home at 3 p.m. because M said I was talking to people that weren't there, but I stopped around 2:15 p.m. I was sick for about 3 days after that, and Al gave me that well-deserved quarter ounce. So, in conclusion, I would recommend never combining too many drugs. What I did was very stupid and almost caused me to die. I was interested in trying Datura seeds. Couple of my friends told me that they have tried it. Nobody had a fun experience and they all told me not to do it. But I had to see it myself. I took a tablespoon of seeds. After about 20 minutes I started to feel strange. I was lying in a bed at my friend's house. I tried to stretch but it didn't take the bad feeling away. I tried to walk, but I lost my sense of balance. Talking was also very hard. I couldn't say anything loud and clear enough so my friend could understand me. When I thought I could finally walk, we decided to get some fresh air. He had to hold my hand, because every few seconds, I would completely lose control of my body, and collapse. This period was very short, and I would usually get control back before I would hit the ground, but sometimes I would really fall on my face if my friend wasn't there. That was the most irritating thing, because, when I could control myself, I couldn't believe that it can happen again. But it did, over and over, every few seconds. After an hour or so, my perception of time was lost, these seizures stopped, and I wanted to go home. I left my friend because I wanted to go alone. I couldn't see what the time was, because my vision was too blurry. My watch was covered with ice, and I couldn't see through it. Then I remember I woke up in my bed thinking of strange dreams. I had a headache and didn't remember the things I have done the other night or how I got home. Slowly some fragments started to come to my mind. I remembered that I have spoken to some people, real or fictional, who didn't want to talk to me. They could have been real people who didn't understand the word I was saying, or were scared of my dark eyes, wide open. I remembered that I stopped in front of police station. I thought that one policeman told me to get him something. I probably walked a couple of steps away and got the feeling that the work was done and returned to wait for him. Then the real policeman came and started to ask questions. I think he was real because of his interrogative look in his eyes. I told him everything about his college but he didn't believe me. At one moment I just walked away. There's a big black hole from that point to how I got to my home, which is about 15 kilometers away. I was in my third period study hall when the kid that sat in front of me told me that he had something for me to try. He said it was apple thorns. I had never heard of it before, and he said that if I were to eat the seeds then I would feel like I was drunk. So I took a handful of the seeds, fresh from the pod by the way, and ate them. The taste was so bitter. Nothing happened for like 15 to 20 minutes and then I thought to myself, damn it. But by the time I was in fourth period history, I started to feel the effects start to kick in. I was really dizzy and I felt really good. Then they started to kick in harder. I dropped my pencil and almost fell out of my chair. The room was spinning around me. I felt like shit. I felt like I was going to throw up, so I walked to the office and called home. Not knowing that there was physical signs of substance abuse. I looked at myself later in the mirror and my eyes were bloodshot and dilated. I could barely walk and my mouth was dry as hell. I started to walk to the bathroom because I was going to throw up. As I was walking, I suddenly stopped, looked around, and I forgot where I was going. Then I remembered again, so I continued on my way to the bathroom. I got in the stall and started dry heaving. It was the worst experience in my life. When my dad finally got to the school to take me home, it was 1:30. I went home and slept. And the whole time I had my eyes closed, I kept seeing bright white flashes of light. And as I was laying in my bed, I started to hear voices and I didn't know where it was coming from. I didn't even recognize the voices either, but I started to talk back to them but they didn't respond back. Then I fell asleep. When I woke up, it was all over. It was really strange. I will never touch that shit again. Let's start from the beginning. I never used other drugs except ecstasy. I tried carefully Datura seeds some years ago, but I think it was too small portion. I just was feeling drunk and sleepy. But this time I did everything properly. I made tea from one flower and some small leaves and took it on empty stomach. It kicks me almost immediately. I could not move and could not open my eyes. Under eyelids I saw many amazing colors changing and moving. Then from other room came my boyfriend. He was my babysitter. He asked if I started to trip and I discovered that I could not say more than 1-2 words. It was so funny that I started to laugh and just could not stop. It was strange because I read a lot of rapports about bad and horrible trips, so I was prepared to see something scary. Also, I want to say that even reading a lot about spooky things that described others, I never was worried about it. My purpose was different from others. I think I just wanted Datura help me to open my mind. So it starts at 12 midday. I was relaxed and happy, smiling and laughing. I remember my boyfriend gave me a bottle of water and I could not hold it. It was so heavy and it was funny too. I wanted to speak, but after 2 words I forgot completely what I wanted to say. In one point my boyfriend asked me how I feel. I was perfectly well. He asked if I remember everything. Of course I remember. But I found out gap in my memory for almost 6 hours. I did not remember anything from the tale my boyfriend told to me. First I throw up. Second, I could not stand on my legs but still was walking, trying at least. My friend became my shadow and was following me everywhere so I don't harm myself. I was bumping on the walls and chairs. Also, I was looking for something everywhere, was taking objects from one place and put them somewhere else. So I woke up at 6 very disappointed. I wanted to have this experience but remembered nothing. And in 1 week I decided to consume roots. Like before I make a tea, just instead of leaves I used roots. The taste was awful. Even worse than taste of leaves. The roots was dried and about 10 centimeters. We just came back from the dinner so my stomach wasn't empty like first time. The time was 4 at noon. It took about 15 minutes to start to feel something. I was all smiles again. The vision became blurry like in first time. This time I remembered almost everything. Few times I spilled the water from the bottle we drink of. I again was walking around our apartment moving things. And later memory came back to me in pieces. Once I was in bedroom and heard somebody came in living room. I saw there a man sitting on the couch and I decided that was friend of my boyfriend, but later he told me that nobody came in. More or less I woke up at 3 at night. My friend was already sleeping. But somehow I decided that it was 3 in afternoon and few times was trying to wake him up. Then confused I was staring in window and could not understand where is the sun, why at 3 o'clock is so dark outside. I was sitting in my chair and saw an old woman was sitting opposite me and watching me. I did not want to watch her directly, but she did not lose me from her sight so I came closer and asked what she is doing here. She did not answer. In a moment I saw old men near to her, they was couple. Then on the couch appeared a woman with a daughter, then they vanished. By that time I was really tired. I went to bed but before fall asleep 2 times I heard somebody was flushing water in toilet. Next 3 days I still had blurry vision. Nothing was spooky or frightening, I felt good. A little bit disappointed but good. Next time I will try seeds. I really think that the things that I see depends on my point of view, the way I see the world and what I want from the world. The next day I felt weird, but better. So that's my experience. This is my experience with the Datura or angel trumpets as we call them. A few years back I had heard of the angel trumpet. A few persons I had known had done this and overdosed. But me being very curious told some friends and they went and picked some flowers. We boiled them and made a few gallons of them. We then mixed the juices diluted with a little water with tea or Kool-Aid. We would drink it by the cup. It was the weirdest thing I had ever experienced. I was sitting in my room after I had done it, I then started hallucinating. I saw a monster come at me with a spike sticking out of its head. I saw a huge bird trying to peck my eyes out. I saw millions of cockroaches pouring out of my bathroom wall. I saw an alien when me and some of my friends walked to the corner store. I was having conversations with people who were not at my house and we were in a whole new setting, for example at school. I don't remember half of the things that happened. My brother and his friends said one night when I did it they came in the house and saw me pouring coffee and hot boiling water and milk and sugar all over my kitchen floor. They asked me what I was doing and I replayed making coffee. I do not even remember this happening. When drinking this after a while it gave me the worst cotton mouth imaginable. My throat was so dry that it actually hurt. We were only about 14 or 15 when we had discovered this. As a joke we made this guy drink 32 ounces of the angel trumpets. Hero would note, please don't dose others without their knowledge. This is extremely dangerous and uncool. While this situation ended okay, it could have turned out much worse. He was at our house, his father came and picked him up. Next thing we know his father called my parents and said that the guy on the angel trumpets walked back to our house and he came looking for him and found him passed out in our front yard. He then brought him to the hospital which is near my house and he had overdosed. He came out of it though. I talked to him a few weeks later and he said that he saw a lot of the same things I had seen. Insects, he said. I was in his room at the hospital talking to him amongst many other things. I really would not suggest doing this. It's really visual with all of the things you see, but it can be so dangerous. You don't know what you are doing or where you are. It is very frightening when you think about it. Also if you do too much you can overdose like a few of the people I knew who did it, and if not you can end up making coffee on the floor. Or doing some other stupid things. I would stick to pot or drugs you can control. For this you cannot control. Ever since I began using I've had an unquenchable thirst for learning about all of the substances that I enjoy, namely hallucinogens. I have looked for everything from amanitas to psilocybes, and many herbs and shrubs of the sort. Well, I had no luck or timing looking for most except Datura, and some others, but this is about my Datura experience. Okay, next time I do this I am going to prepare a salve and rub it on my legs like Don Juan tells Carlos. This time I just made a tea. I boiled it until it turned a little bit darker than apple juice for about 30 minutes. After that, let it cool, then chugged it all at once, not even looking back. I filled the glass up with water and kept my tea ball in to extract the remaining alkaloids. That water turned the same color. I didn't drink it as fast because I didn't want to purge. After a half hour had passed I began to feel a little dizzy or delirious. I went and looked in the mirror, no dilated pupils yet. Then went back to my room. I noticed everything looked sort of glossy. When I had looked in the mirror I even looked much better, I thought. After a while I began to lose perception and I had to touch things just to make sure they were there, or that close or far. That's when the stuff really started to fuck out my brains. I was getting weird ideas like someone else was in my brain telling me to do things. This was weird because I would start to do something and then go do something else and then go do something else. It was like speeding and seeing yourself running around trying to do all of this shit, but none of it you really finish. Most of the time I was unconscious. I would sort of wake up every so often in the middle of something to tell myself to go to the bathroom or drink something. One time on my way to the bathroom I just stopped and was staring at the floor. My dad came out and noticed me in deep thought, or so it looked, and he asked me what I was looking at. I tried to say just the floor, but my throat was so dry I could barely talk and tears of embarrassment almost came to my eyes. He looked at my face and asked me what was up. I just said that I thought I was sick. He told me to do what I was going to do and go to his office. So I went in the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes had went from green to solid black. This wasn't new. I've fried acid and shrooms, and been more fucked up than this. The only thing is Datura is a lot different. It isn't really an hallucinogen, it is more of a deliriant. I don't remember much else. My dad said that I was pretty messed up. He said that I would try to say something and it would be blah blah blah, and he said that I would stare off into space forever, and was really not conscious of anything going on except if there was a lot of activity, music, someone shaking me, lights, etc. If you pay attention to anything in this whole article I would recommend not taking Datura before school, or if you don't want to make a fool of yourself. Other than that, have at it. Dilated pupils last 2 days after the experience. They're not super dilated, just enough to make light irritating, and another effect is I got kind of depressed after the experience. I was prepared for this though, so I'm warning you. There was a horror film triple bill on at the cinema and I thought I would take some Datura to make things interesting. I had read something on Datura a while back saying how the user hallucinates and that these hallucinations seem real. I thought that if I took some, then some 3D hallucinations would complement the film and make for a great experience. So it was that I chewed up a handful of the seeds before going in to watch the film Scary Movie. Anyway, I was disappointed. All that happened was that the damn seeds sent me to sleep about halfway through the film. I woke up towards the end and felt that I had wasted my time. However, when I went to get up, my balance went and I staggered down the steps of the cinema wondering what the hell was going on. Feeling disoriented, I struggled to gain my balance and thought that maybe some food would do me good, so I headed towards a Burger King. I had trouble walking straight and I remember one person saying, as I passed, "He looks like he's on drugs," and that person's companion saying, "Yes, you can always tell." This did not fill me with confidence as I headed into the burger bar. I decided to order a large extra value meal and sat down with my tray of food. I did not feel hungry, but felt that I should eat to give my body the ability to cope with the effects of the seeds. My first mouthful was a real effort. My saliva had almost dried up. I managed one more mouthful, but on the third mouthful the food just lodged in my throat and it took a huge mouthful of Coke to shift it. I noticed now that an old woman and her grandson who were sitting opposite had stopped eating and were now just watching me. I happened to look down at this point and saw that my hands were bright red. At this point the thought came to me that something weird and powerful was happening to me and I should get the hell home as quick as possible. I quickly left and staggered through the crowded streets to the station for my train home. I remember thanking my lucky stars that the train was on the platform and due to depart in a couple of minutes. I sat down on the train and breathed a sigh of relief. The train departed. Unfortunately, sleep was overtaking me. En route to my stop I drifted in and out of sleep. What was worse was that on waking I found myself muttering gibberish to myself. I quickly shut myself up, saw that a couple of people on the crowded train looking at me, on resolve to stay awake, only to fall asleep again. One time I woke, the train was just pulling into my stop and, thanking my lucky stars again, ran for the doors. Well, I made it the short walk back home. However, home was a nearly deserted old nurse's home and not the most welcoming of places. As I walked up the corridor to the lift, I saw a man walking his dog, then the man and dog walked into a wall and disappeared. This was one particular moment that I will remember till the day I die, but I didn't want to hang around. I just wanted to get to bed and sleep off the effect of the seeds. I did not make it to bed. Outside my room, a group of beings greeted me. I quickly realized that although they looked similar to us, they were not human. One male had a round head and an absolutely huge smile that suggested a mouth containing about 100 teeth. Another male had a face that smoothly merged into his neck with no chin whatsoever. A female had some type of microchip eyes. These characters greeted me telepathically. They then escorted me up the corridor and pointed out a hieroglyphic drawn in some exposed plaster on the wall and said that they had done that themselves. Around this time I remember looking at the hallway carpet as I stretched up the hall thinking, wow, what a huge long dress that lady was wearing. Everything gets kind of hazy from now on. Several details are clear however. Soon after I entered my room, two different beings presented themselves who communicated telepathically with each other. Some telepathic thoughts entered my head on occasions, the details of which I cannot unfortunately remember. I remember feeling extremely inferior and loudly stated that it was an unfair situation because I was having to rely on speech. I did telepathically communicating hello to one of them at one point. I got a look from both of them as if I had been making a rude gesture towards them, before more telepathic communication was sent to me a few seconds later. I remember feeling also that I should show some hospitality to my guests and went to the kitchen to fill a kettle to make some tea for them. I returned to my room, made 2 mugs of tea and asked the being who was sat in my armchair if he would like a mug. This being just sat there and looked at me. I put the tea down and said that if he wanted it then he should help himself to it. Shortly after, or maybe before, I was walking in the corridor when I saw more beings lurking in a dark unlit section of corridor. I felt extremely uneasy about this and went to call on a friend who lived on the floor below. But just as I was approaching his door I noticed more of these beings and I turned back. I hammered on the door of another friend. She answered and asked, "What is it?" My mind then went blank and I paused before blurting how the cleaner had emptied my cupboard of food. I don't remember her response, but she swiftly closed her door, leaving me in a state of panic. I decided to phone security. I said how there were a couple of intruders on the premises. The security man put me through to the police. I said that there were a couple of dodgy characters in the building who were near me now. However, just as I was saying this I began to feel some warmth to the beings and began regretting my call. The policeman asked if they had made any direct threat to me, to which I replied that well no they hadn't exactly. I then said that they probably had much more serious things to deal with and apologized. The policeman said a patrol car would come round anyway. I put the phone down and winced. I really didn't want the police to interfere and possibly endanger my new friends, as I had suddenly come to regard them. After a few minutes I made my way to the front lounge, where the TV was on. I had now realized that it was very late, in the middle of the night. There were 2 more beings in the lounge, watching TV. I peeked through the curtains and saw to my relief a patrol car pulling away. I turned back to the room and saw that the beings had stopped watching TV and were looking at me. I was now feeling thirsty and drank from the tap in the kitchenette bit at the edge of the lounge. I tried to engage these beings in conversation, but they ignored me and just watched TV. I sat down and joined them. They communicated with each other, but ignored me. Occasionally, one or the other would vanish. I would turn to find one of them gone and seconds later reappear. By now nothing was surprising me. Meanwhile, the last program of the night had finished and there was just a text information service on the TV screen, as is normal for 4:30 a.m. I joked to one of the beings whether he was a fan of the night screen information program. No response. I went back to my bedroom. The 2 beings who had been there originally were still there. They were now vanishing and reappearing. As time went on they began to vanish for longer and longer periods and I knew that they would leave for good soon. After a while, there was only one left and he looked a bit sickly or tired. I felt a bit helpless that there was nothing I could do to help and eventually he disappeared for good. Feeling myself left on my own finally, my thought was unsure of what exactly reality was. I did feel privileged to have had such an experience, and lucky that I had made it home. The friend whose door I hammered on told me later on that it had been 3:30 when I had knocked, 12 hours after swallowing the seeds. If there had been people around while I had been prowling the corridors then who knows what might have happened. I also think that there may have been a lucid dream element somewhere. I have now started doing exercises to facilitate lucid dreams and on one occasion, as I was falling asleep, as my mind was throwing up hypnagogic images, up popped one of the beings. One of the types with no chin. Well, I shot awake in bed with a start and it took me a while to settle again. However, I suppose that if I manage to regularly repeat this, then it will be less of a surprise and I may engage consciously with this being sometime. I would definitely recommend Datura to those broad-minded enough to cope with otherworldly happenings. Was I flirting with schizophrenia or was I engaging with extraterrestrial beings? Whatever. It certainly opened my mind and I will be definitely taking it again once more. Once I have got to grips with lucid dreaming, this is the intuition telling me what to do now. I started using DPH a couple of years ago in the form of 50 mg Sleep Easy tablets. It started off small and I used it to help me sleep, but I noticed I would get high off it and started taking bigger doses to get high. Max dose I took was 750 mg. 1 full pack of Sleep Easy and 1 full pack of Benadryl. I was so freaked up I heard tapping on my bedroom window and I couldn't walk without grabbing hold to something. Next morning I woke and heard a loud knock on the door. The knock on the door is what woke me up lowland. When I went to check the door, no one was there. I couldn't believe it cause the knock was that surreal it woke me up out of bed. Anyways, I decided to give Datura and I.C.U a try, reading online about how similar it was to Benadryl. I ordered a few packs of seeds online and took 5 for my first try. I felt slight effects and managed to get to sleep on it, but it is not a good type of sleep, more like the type of sleep you get after getting really drunk and you just black out and can't remember nothing. 10 seeds was the most I took. It gave me a nasty fever and horrible dry mouth. Same with the scopolamine motion sickness patch, which I abused for the relaxation it gave me. I stopped all that after a while. Same with DPH, even at low doses, cause the side effects are just too brutal and it lingered with me for a long time. I think DPH might have gave me some permanent memory problems and the Datura and scopolamine gave me some permanent vision problems, and nowadays I find it very hard to focus because of it. Also, DPH would give me this crashed out meth feeling that would stick with me for a nice while. I've done speed before and that feeling I'd get when I would come down off it is pretty similar to what I would get from DPH. I am old now, but I recall the night, some of it, that I encountered Datura stramonium. I was almost 20, when D, a friend long since disassociated with, told me to come over and try this stuff we'd never tried before. D and I had done everything there was to do back then. There is quite a list. D lived just outside of town. I lived further out in the country. He called them gourd seeds. They looked disgusting, all moist and brown in a large baggy kind of like compost. The spiny portions of the seed pods were there too. There were a lot of them in the bag, maybe 2 ounces worth. D didn't know how much to take. So, we started off small. I don't recall his dose, but mine was about the size of a silver dollar, a small pile in my palm. We chewed them, swallowed all, and then waited, patiently. We waited for a long time, but we did not take any more. After about an hour, suddenly, I yelled, "What was that?" pointing to the upper corner of his room. It was a dark object. D laughed and yelled, "It's the gourd seeds. They're working." From that moment on, I was sleepwalking. I remember only brief moments thereafter. I remember feeling concerned that I should go home. Things were happening that were uncomfortable for me. I don't know how long I was at D's, but I was leaving. I remember getting in my car. D jumped on the hood trying to stop me, screaming at me not to go, but I started driving. Apparently, D jumped off as I left, but I did not drive home. I turned toward town. As you read this, try and discern what is real and what is not real, because they were the same for me. I remember talking to D in the passenger seat as I drove. He was talking back. We talked for a long time. It was dark now. I remember walking on railroad tracks, not just over them, but down them. I walked on the tracks for a long time talking to somebody. I liked to play with non-poisonous snakes when I was younger. I remember seeing green grass snakes poke their heads out of the grass along the right-of-way. I hurried down to catch one, but each time, they were gone, eluded me. Not unusual. They are very quick. I kept on walking down the tracks. As I walked, I had a wicker basket draped over my left arm. I was picking apples, big red ones, right out of the sky. I was putting the apples in the basket. Before all of this happened, I had been working at a local hardware store stocking merchandise. There was a security guard who worked there who knew me. Coincidentally, he was riding around with the local cops that night when they drove by, and he saw me walking down the railroad tracks. He yelled at me, "Hey what are you doing?" They tell me that I smiled and shot them the peace sign. They whirled around and were on me. They put handcuffs on me. I had never been arrested before. I remember sitting in a hard wooden chair in the police station. The cops kept asking me about LSD. I told them, they're gourd seeds. They did not know what that was, and they thought I was lying. They called my dad. He was on his way. I remember waiting for my dad as the cops watched me. I was holding one of my apples. I had bitten it once. For a brief moment, I got my shit together, and I looked down at my hand to see what I was holding. My fingers were positioned in the shape for holding an apple, but there was no apple. I immediately began looking around my chair. The cops said, "What are you looking for?" I said, "I dropped my apple." My dad got there. He was very sad, mad as hell, but more hurt than anything. He had to take me to piss. He asked me, "Where is the car?" I said, I don't know. I didn't know where the car was. The cops had no evidence. They let my dad take me to the hospital for sedation and observation and detox. I woke up straight but very groggy. I got up, put my clothes on, and walked out without saying a word. The hospital staff either didn't see me or didn't care. My dad paid for the hospital room, but I'll never be able to pay him back for the pain I caused him. He found the car parked off the road. It was locked just over the tracks about a quarter mile from where they found me. The bag of gourd seeds was on the back seat. I told him, "I told you it was gourd seeds." As if I would be vindicated. I was not vindicated. I really wish I had read up on Datura before just drinking the tea of 6 seed pods my friend had made. So I drink 2 cups, coffee mugs actually, on the night before Thanksgiving. I'm with a group of friends. They're all watching Candyman cracking up and for some reason I start to feel the effects and I start to pet the floor. The floor feels so good. Then I tried standing up but my head was so heavy I kept falling over. Next thing I know I'm in the bathroom just sitting on the floor and staring at my friend sitting with me in silence. My friend comes in saying she has to go home by curfew, so I have to drive. This is where all hell breaks loose. I remember the car turning into the carpet I was petting earlier. My friend's telling me I'm driving in people's yards but all I see is carpet. By then, my mouth was so dry I couldn't swallow and I could barely even speak. I'm just driving. So we crash, and I keep on driving and my friend, still quite sober, jumps out of the car. I end up totaling my car. Don't remember much but the cracked windshield and saying, "Is everyone okay?" Hallucinating people are in the car with me, but I'm alone. I kind of black out, then I have small memory of the cops questioning me and my friends being taken to the hospital, then not understanding how to pee in a cup so I had to get a catheter up me. And my friends did too. I black out from there. So my mom actually videotapes me messed up. I'm having conversations with people who aren't there, talking about off-the-wall things that have nothing to do with the situation. I say we have to go to Target to the person that isn't on the phone at 5 a.m., or asked how I'm feeling. I reply, "Movies today aren't good like 1 and 3, you know, just total nonsense." So I wake up the next day with no memory of me crashing my car or any of it happening. I have rational thought back, but I still hallucinate the entire next day. It was Thanksgiving. I have no idea what we ate, what we talked about. I just remember watching some made-up cartoon in my head on a sheet of aluminum foil. I hallucinated some more, like some horse and buggy going down my neighbor's driveway, etc. Went to bed and woke up the next day fine, except for blurry vision and dilated eyes. Sounds funny and cool, but it's really not. I couldn't talk without choking on my tonsils, there's no saliva, I felt retarded and unable to do any regular daily task, I was just about paralyzed. Don't do it. One day I was at a girl's house giving her a drum lesson. When it came time for me to go, she gave me 2 tablespoons of Datura seeds. She told me not to worry, that they were safe. I went home and swallowed the seeds with a glass of water. I don't really remember feeling it coming on or realizing that I was coming up. I was just sitting in front of my computer 1 minute and then suddenly I was just out of my mind. I don't remember exactly what it was like when my parents came home, but I remember somehow dealing with them without them realizing I was higher than a kite. I went down to my bedroom, and sat on my bed. During this time I didn't really have a scene of what was going on. It seems like I was just so out of it that I couldn't stop and think what I was going to do. Instead I would just find myself doing something and realize I had no idea why I was where I was. Before long, members of my family showed up. I don't know if I tried to communicate with them. I don't know how it started, but I saw some small furry creatures running around the house and had the urge to chase them. I don't know how long I chased them, but the next thing I know my mom was yelling at me, "What are you on?" I knew I couldn't get out of this one. Then the Ramones song "Now I Wanna Sniff Some Glue" came into my head, so I told her I've been sniffing glue. My mom then took me up to her bedroom and locked me in there. As I laid down to sleep, kept seeing things and thinking I was in situations that I was not. For example, I was sitting in front of my computer again and I had a glass of water in front of me. I tried to grab it but my hand went right through it. I tried a few more times but my hand went right through. The thing about Datura is that it's not like any other high. You can't stop and think, wow, this feels cool, I'm seeing all kinds of shit. It just happens. 1 minute you're normal and then you're out of your body and mind. One thing that I can remember is that Datura seemed to make me revert back to my childhood. When my mom took me upstairs, I couldn't stop asking her, "Am I a good boy, mama?" When I thought about it the next day, I realized that is exactly how I would have acted in the same situation when I was 3 years old. Datura is definitely the most fun and intense hallucination I have done, and I strongly recommend it. First off, I'm not exactly sure what the dosage of Datura seeds was, but it was around 250 seeds throughout the day. It all started at around 11 a.m. on a Saturday. At that time I found some dead Datura stramonium on my land. The seed pods on most of them were open, but they still had a lot of seeds in them, so I gathered as many seeds as I could. When I got back to my house, I crushed up about 100 seeds and put them in a tea bag and dipped it in some really hot water. The water turned a yellowish green color, which I put sugar in and cooled it. I drank the whole thing around 11:30 a.m. and waited around for an hour for the effects to kick in, and when they didn't I ate about 75 more seeds. Then I got a little impatient after half an hour and decided to eat another 75 seeds to ensure that I got effects off baseline. An hour later, 1 p.m., the effects started to kick in. It wasn't very intense, but I did notice the effects. My pupils became dilated, my heart was beating at a rather fast rate, about 120 beats per second, and all of the fingertips on my right hand felt like they were numb and swelling. I had to be at work at 4 o'clock, and since I didn't have any loss of motor control or any visual changes, I decided to just go to work without eating any more seeds. My pupils were still dilated and my heart was still racing the whole time I was working. When I got off work, I decided to go out and get some allergy pills to trip off of, since the Jimson weed failed at giving me any hallucinations. I am fairly experienced with the effects of the allergy pill trip, and about 23 or 24 pills with 25 milligrams of diphenhydramine usually gets me to a good hallucinogenic state, but I have never talked to or even seen people that weren't there until this night. I took 23 pills around 7 p.m., not thinking that they would intensify the chemicals in the Datura seeds, but maybe I should have thought about it because I could have killed myself. Around 8 o'clock I got a ride back to this party house I have, and the effects started to kick in. I got a really heavy feeling throughout my whole body and I felt really tired. I didn't tell anyone at the house that I had taken anything, but I did start smoking this half joint that I had when I got there. I was sitting out on the front porch with one of my best friends while I was smoking it. After a few minutes of talking to him, he could tell I was really fucked up because I would forget what he was talking about in the middle of his sentences, and I would constantly call him different names. His name was Jimmy and I kept on calling him Kyle, Sam, or sometimes Brandon. So I decided to tell him what I took, and he just laughed about it a little bit, and we just sat out there for a little while longer while I finished my joint. It was really hard to finish it though, because I would forget I was smoking it and I would drop it all the time and had a hard time finding it because it was dark and I would hallucinate a bunch of joints all over the ground. My friend usually had to find it for me. When I got done with my J, we went to Kroger for some reason to see if my brother was working. We walked in and I was walking beside Jimmy in the store talking to him. I later found out that Jimmy never walked in there with me in the first place and I was talking to thin air. He was just outside the store laughing at me talking to myself. This is the point where I stopped remembering. Jimmy said he came into Kroger and started asking me who I was talking to, and I asked him if he wanted to sell the van. Neither me or Jimmy have ever had a van in our lives, so he just walked me back out to the car. He said that when we got in the car I started talking to someone in the back seat who wasn't there. I said it was my ex-girlfriend, and he said I talked to the imaginary girl for a long time, but he couldn't understand what I was saying. I was talking to quiet and I was mumbling most of the time, I think. The effects must have worn off slightly by the time we got back to the house, because I can remember getting back there and being there. When I got there I started talking to some people there who could tell I was really fucked up by the way I was talking, so I just told them I took some allergy pills. They would have been mad if I said I ate Jimson weed because it's poisonous, and they believed it because I was acting like I usually do on them. While I was there I remember picking up this container that was full of weed. I remember playing with the weed for a while saying that we should roll it up and smoke it, but everyone said that there was nothing there. I remember looking at it and feeling it in my fingers and it seemed so real, it was crazy. After a while of sitting there me and my brother decided to go home, and all the way home I was having slight dreams where I would be in a conversation with someone and I would talk back to them, and the second I did I would wake up and my brother would ask me what I was talking about and I just said I didn't know. At one point in the ride home I saw car lights in the distance that said something to me, and when I talked back they disappeared. It was nuts. When I got back to my house I got in my room and started looking for something. I don't know what it was, but I figured I would remember when I saw it. I never found whatever it was that I was looking for and I decided to go to sleep. I had a bunch of vivid dreams that night and I couldn't tell if the events in my dream really happened or not. I was so confused in the morning. I was still seeing things in the corner of my eyes and almost everything that moved was trilling that whole next day, and my pupils were still very dilated. I have stopped doing all drugs since this experience because I believe that I was close to death. I played with poison that night and I believe I am very lucky to be alive today. I hope nobody else ever tries Datura or allergy pills. At the time of the intoxication I didn't know the hallucinations weren't real, so it wasn't any fun at all. I am an 18-year-old Greek guy who got interested in psychedelics after a period of solving my personal problems. I knew of heroin a long time ago, so I thought I should consult it before using any substance. I looked and looked through the files and I found something easy to obtain but that would give me an unforgettable experience. So in my mind were Morning Glory, Datura and Salvia. I looked for all of them in shops but I was eager to try something at low cost, so I took the first thing I found, Datura. I got hold of 100 grams of Datura seeds, black to brownish, and I had the common sense not to use them all at once. I'm happy I didn't. I was at my home with my family and because they trust me I prepared everything almost in plain sight. At first I grinded up 1 teaspoon of Datura seeds and boiled them in half a cup of water. The liquid was yellowish and before consuming it I added some sugar. After this beverage I felt completely normal and I had another one but without blending the seeds. Nothing happened and I decided to go out with my girlfriend. Thessaloniki, the city I live in, is crowded and I thought that if this seemingly harmless thing had any effect I could maximize them by interacting with people and the scenery. I went out and my girlfriend had the idea of going to the cinema. So we did. After 2 hours of consuming it I still felt sober, but I noticed that something was different. Everything around me got an eerie dreamy aura and my mouth went completely dry. The movie seemed like a dream, out of focus and as if it was only in my head. I tried eating popcorn and I almost choked on them, leaving my girlfriend wondering what has happened to me. After 6.5 hours of consumption I was back at home, but nothing radical has happened, although I noticed I was missing something from the picture. So, foolish enough, I decided to chew another teaspoon and down it with some water. I went to sleep but I felt my body getting hot and I started seeing red flashes about 2 hours later. I got amazed because they weren't in my head, I could see them with closed eyes and they would repeat. The morning I woke up at 10 o'clock and weird stuff started happening. I closed my eyes in a half-sleepy state and I could swear I could see through my eyelids and I could observe the room. I felt it was so alive and I could see people around me but in different rooms, since I convinced myself I could look through walls too. I waited for 2 hours to pass and I decided to get out of my bed since this stuff couldn't be that strong. When I entered the room my family was in. They started looking weird at me because of my dilated pupils. Actually you can be more accurate if you call them black holes, not pupils. I assured them I was okay, sober and fully functional, and went to spend some time with my PC. Well, this gave me the creeps. I was letter blind, I could not read, everything was blurry and really scary. I tried experimenting with colors and I light up my lighter, turned off all light in the room and move it at high speed in front of me. To my amazement it left traces of purple hue behind it. I know it wasn't my pupil dilation because ecstasy, which gave me pupil dilation too, had no such effects on me. I started thinking that I have just caused myself permanent damage, but I waited for 6 additional hours trying to sleep in my home just to see if I needed any medical help. Eventually it started clearing up, so I decided I should give it time. My advice to anyone who reads it is that Datura is not a game, it is a tool, and if you are advised to poly with it or fool around with it, should consider it better. Ever heard of anyone fooling around with a knife or a handgun? It's almost the same, it can kill you.